Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7 of the Daily Drops. I'm your host Bobby Capucci, and we got some more Jeffrey Epstein news for you tonight. What we got tonight is an article from the New York Mag, and in this article, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyers are still questioning if his death was a suicide or if he was murdered. And in this article, they're going to go through a couple of the different scenarios, a few different scenarios of what could have happened or what the lawyer's motivation could be for wanting to keep this story alive in the media or maybe just in the internet even. So, anyway, I'm happy you guys are all here. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time maybe, we do a series of news stories each day following this case so that we're covering it in real time. And sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 stories for the evening, and other times we'll just have one story. Like tonight, we just have the one story. But if you go back and you start from episode 1, you'll be able to follow daily what's been going on in this case, the most juicy parts of the case, the most important things from our perspective here at the Jeffrey Epstein Show. So let's jump right into this article today and see what you guys think about it. In the past 2 months, the swarm of conspiracy theories surrounding Jeffrey Epstein's death has not dissipated, despite the New York City medical examiner Barbara Sampson's conclusion that he killed himself alone in his cell early on the morning of August 10th. 2 in 3 Americans doubt the results of the official autopsy. Pause the article. Well, that's why we're all here, correct? There's a reason you guys are downloading not only this podcast, but podcasts that have to do with this content like crazy. People want to know the truth. People want to know what's going on, and there's a lot of interest in this case. All right, so we'll go back to the story here. A high but perhaps unsurprising figure considering America's generally paranoid mood these days and the legitimately odd circumstances of Epstein's death. Why, following an alleged attempt to kill himself on July 23rd, was Epstein taking off suicide watch after just 6 days? How could he have hung himself from the top bunk when his prison bed sheets are as thin as paper? And how did a camera outside his cell happen to fail at the same time that 2 guards in his unit fell asleep, providing an unobserved window for whoever killed Epstein to kill Epstein? Skepticism about the official cause of Epstein's untimely end isn't confined to Twitter or gossipy co-workers trying to avoid talking Trump. In court, Epstein's defense team said they have significant doubts regarding the conclusion of suicide. They argue that resolving the questions surrounding Epstein's death is vitally important both to ensure that conditions improve for inmates at MCC and to bolster public confidence in the legal system. Plus, said attorney Martin Weinberg, we deeply want to know what happened to our client. So do we, Mr. Weinberg, so do we. And I agree. I think that all of the questions surrounding all of these weird coincidences around his supposed suicide need to be answered. And I think it needs to be answered in a public manner. I think Attorney General Barr needs to really be transparent with this whole entire situation because you heard it in the article here, 2 in 3 Americans don't even believe the man killed himself. If that's the case, do you think we believe the official story? There's no way. So we'll hop back in the story here. That is no doubt true, but like all aspects of the Epstein case, this point is tangled and complicated, and there are lots of angles for insiders to play. Here's a closer look at what factors, practical, strategic, and otherwise, might be motivating Epstein's attorneys to challenge the official story about his death. Possible explanation number 1. Epstein's attorneys truly doubt the facts point to suicide. During a hearing in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York on August 27th, which was convened to consider the prosecutor's request to drop the sex trafficking charges against Epstein and give his alleged victims an opportunity to speak, defense attorneys Reed Weingarten and Martin Weinberg called for a court investigation into their client's death, citing several details that cast doubt on the suicide ruling. Noting that they had their own doctor observe medical examiner Barbara Sampson's autopsy, Weinberg said, "We are told by a very experienced forensic pathologist that the broken bones in Mr. Epstein's neck, his larynx, and far more consistent with his larynx are far more consistent with external pressure, with strangulation, with homicide, if you will, than with suicide." Pathologist Michael Bodden, who testified for O.J. Simpson's defense, observed the autopsy for the defense, but he wasn't cited by name at the hearing. Weinberg acknowledged that these findings don't exclude suicide, but he said they raise profound issues about what happened to Epstein. The lawyers also asserted that suicide doesn't square with their client's state of mind in the days before his abrupt passing. At or around the time of his death, we did not see a despairing, despondent, suicidal person, Weingarten said. Epstein had reason to be hopeful. His attorneys were on the verge of filing what they considered an ace-in-the-hole motion, which would argue that his non-prosecution agreement in Florida was global and can override the new sex trafficking charges in New York. We had a significant motion to dismiss, Weinberg said. This was not a futile, defeatist attitude. In the New York Post, a source familiar with the case went even further, claiming Epstein was in great spirits in the week before his death and that he told a lawyer on Friday, "The day before he was found in his cell, I'll see you on Sunday." The financier, again, you see what the media does here. Once again, as you notice in all the articles, the financier. We all know what he was. Why don't you call him what he was? The financier, aka pedophile, had so much confidence in his team's pending motion that he seemed delusional, according to the source. So why would Jeffrey Epstein kill himself with all that stuff lining up in his favor, according to this article and according to the sources? If he was confident that he might have an appeal here, why would he kill himself? It just doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense at all. But on with the article. Possible explanation number 2. Epstein's attorneys see a natural partnership with victims' representatives in seeking an investigation. Talk about a yikes, Weingarten remarked in court on August 27th, describing multiple reported failures by MCC staffers. "We have heard allegations that people at the time who had responsibility for protecting our client falsified information," he said. "We understand that there were orders out there that Jeffrey Epstein was never to be left alone and that the orders were ignored by many employees of the prison." Now ask yourselves, why would anyone leave the most high-profile prisoner in the whole entire prison system, pretty much, in that whole entire prison, alone? Why wouldn't there be somebody there to keep an eye on him? Wouldn't you think you'd want to bring this guy to trial and bring him to justice and show the American people that the justice system does work, and not just against them, but for them? The attorney said that the 800-pound gorilla for the defense is the lack of usable video footage from around Epstein's cell and questions about how long this stunning incompetence had gone on. Had the system been out for 6 months, or did it fail shortly before Epstein arrived? That's a really good question. Nobody's answered that question, and we've asked that question before as well. And what if the tapes only broke or were inoperative or were corrupted on the day he was killed or the day he died? That's another good question. What if? Weingarten mused. They were in a completely different situation. Weingarten alleged that in general, conditions at MCC are dreadful, not just for Jeffrey Epstein, but for many of the prisoners over there. Well, be that as it may, there's no reason that Jeffrey Epstein should have killed himself in this prison. He's the first one to kill himself in this facility in like 2 decades. So even though the conditions might be dreadful, they're not dreadful enough that people are killing themselves on a daily basis over there. The defense argued that the court should step in and get to the bottom of these issues, whether by holding hearings or assigning a lawyer to look into them, though there are already several ongoing federal investigations into Epstein's death. Weingarten said that while the defense has complete confidence in prosecutors from the Southern District and the FBI, maybe you do, I certainly don't, and I highly doubt anybody listening to this show does. These are allegations against serious components of the United States Department of Justice. Sometimes the appearance of justice is just as important as justice itself. Court supervision is key for the public to have confidence in the ultimate findings. Okay, hold on. Sometimes the appearance of justice is just as important as justice itself? What? No, it's not. That's ridiculous. It's ludicrous. Justice is what's important, not the appearance of justice. This request was quickly shot down by Assistant U.S. Attorney Maureen Comey. Do you remember that name? You might know that name, right? One of 3 lead prosecutors in SDNY's case against Epstein. She is the daughter of James Comey, the former director central to that other vast international scandal, aka hoax. Maureen Comey argued that a separate investigation into uncharged matters like the manner of Epstein's death is not in the purview of the court. But the request for a court investigation is one of the few points of agreement between the defense and some of Epstein's alleged victims. Gloria Allred, who appeared at the same hearing representing 5 women who claimed to have been abused by the financier, again with this financier nonsense, the pedophile, told New York that such a probe is essential because the system has failed in such glaring way to provide justice for the victims and real accountability for Epstein. Allred, whose clients include alleged victims of R. Kelly and 33 women who accused Bill Cosby of sexual assault, added, "I don't think that it ends at the suicide determination. Ordinarily it might, but because of the massive breakdown in the system, I think that the only neutral option would be the court." Possible explanation. Number 3. Suicide complicates the Epstein's attorney's legal task. Even though Epstein is dead, many of the legal cases against him are not, and his attorneys will continue to represent the interests of his estate. In this context, there could be a compelling legal reason for the defense to cast doubt on a suicide determination. NYU School of Law professor Stephen Gillers notes that suicide can be introduced in court to show consciousness of guilt amounting to a confession. There is precedent in New York as well. In 2016, the case People v. Matthews involving an appellate opinion in which the defendant was convicted of sexual conduct against a child, the court admitted evidence concerning the defendant's suicide attempt, including his suicide note, as relevant to the consciousness of guilt in prosecution. It's possible that Epstein's accusers will pursue this avenue, arguing that his suicide equates to an awareness of his guilt. Overturning the suicide determination could preempt the strategy, leaving the attorneys tasked with defending Epstein, or following his death, preserving what's left of his fortune, with a simpler but still difficult task. Possible explanation number 4. Challenging the suicide ruling could prove profitable for Epstein's attorneys and others. The will Epstein 2 days before his death put the value of his estate at $577 million, not including his art collection. I wonder how much of that was acquired by using poor girls like Maria Farmer to find it and then abusing them. I wonder how many other girls are out there that have had the same... Anyway, back to the article. But the suicide ruling may be the factor in how much money is ultimately available to Epstein's currently unidentified heirs, people owed compensation, and his alleged victims. Epstein's attorneys, of course, are obliged and motivated to work in the interests of the estate, which includes maximizing its assets. Some life insurance policies do not pay if the person has committed suicide, as opposed to if they were murdered, notes Ely Honig, a white-collar defense attorney, former federal prosecutor and CNN legal analyst. There's no public information on whether or not Epstein had life insurance, but it's common for high net worth individuals to buy policies. According to one wealth management consultant, life insurance policies are often required for the profoundly wealthy to obtain loans. Although Epstein's path to riches didn't involve a lot of conventional borrowing, boy, is that the understatement of the whole entire article, and that's saying a lot. The ultra-rich are not always liquid, so life insurance payouts can help cover big-ticket post-mortem costs, like, say, paying elite white-collar attorneys to defend one's estate against claims from scores of young women and children. Getting to the bottom of MCC's failures could have side benefits for everyone seeking payment from the Epstein estate. It is possible that the Epstein estate may assert a claim against the jail for negligent supervision. Gloria Allred proposed. If circumstances of death result in successful claims by the estate against the jail, that could result in additional funds going into the estate that in turn could be potentially available to victims to file lawsuits and prove claims. An eventual win in that motion could mean a handsome payday for Epstein's lawyers. Bradley Edwards, the Florida attorney who represented several Epstein accusers since as early as 2005, nodded at this possibility during the August 27 hearing, saying that while no one was pleased by the defendant's passing, if it's determined that there is some civil rights violation and there is some civil remedy for Mr. Epstein that goes into the estate, certainly the victims are interested in that, as they might help to repair the damage done. Martin Weinberg acknowledged in a statement to New York that the defense could pursue such a suit, but he suggested that it would be for moral, not just monetary reasons. If we bring a federal lawsuit against the MCC, it is as much about principle as money, he said. No one should die in jail, and any lawsuit would be seeking to determine who was responsible for Mr. Epstein's death, as well as the horrific conditions in which he was detained. Okay. Well, what do you guys think? Do you think it was one of those 4 reasons? Do you think it was something else? I want to hear it. I want to know what you folks think happened to Jeffrey Epstein in that jail cell. Do you think he committed suicide? Do you think that somebody killed him? Do you think that somebody left him unsupervised so he could kill himself? Whatever it may be, let's hear it. Make sure you shoot us the emails. Head to, you can shoot me emails at bcinlv702@yahoo.com. And that's the email address I'll be answering questions for these the daily drops. You can send the emails there if you want to talk about what I was just talking about as far as what happened in that jail cell, because I'm really interested to hear what other people think. And then on the Sunday show, I will talk about what I think happened in that jail cell. Ooh, I know, suspense, right? All right, so I hope you guys had a great day, and that's going to be the end of this daily drop, and we'll be back at it tomorrow, following the story down the rabbit hole, wherever it may lead. Let's keep making media great again.